morning, all. Good morning, John, my co-host. That's a big cup of coffee, John. Oh my God. I'm Ina Pinkney. For those of you who don't know me, I have been honored with the tapping of the title of chairperson for this group right now. John will be my co-host. Ken, the magnificent Ken, who everybody seems to know no matter where I tune in. He's been the sort of the leader to get us all together and marching in the same direction. And he has promised to be my advisory council. And I made him promise that he'd keep me in line. Not that I think that's a possibility, but I'm going to offer it anyway. So
that's a big job. That's a big job.
Oh, you have no idea. Oh, no idea. Who said the other thing about ask your wife? Ask my ex-husband. Okay. So today, I want to bring all of you newbies up to speed on where we are. So because we're very new and because we are putting our minds on the same track, we want very much to do this in a way that honors everybody's understanding. We decided not to become a serious governance group yet. That will come after we put together a list of things that we need from people and playing to everybody's strength. And so we have decided to keep it a little bit loose right this minute without electing people I lost my words here today, officers. So not quite electing officers yet. So I've taken this on and we will get to that, but I don't feel the rush for that. I think we need to understand what the advocacy is all about. And then I will have probably just three advisors. And as we said, we'll have two meetings a month on the second and the fourth Thursday, one with a speaker and one for a general discussion. It is a brainstorming session today about what we should be covering. I think it's also important that the speakers we have really play into our mission of advocacy. One of the things that I heard yesterday and in the other Zooms I've been joining is that people are afraid to advocate for themselves, that going to a doctor who's not giving you your answers or not finding a way of getting the help you need or rejecting the help that you don't need. And I think we all have to pay attention to how we advocate for ourselves and speak up constantly about what it is that makes us okay in the world. And so we want a very clear understanding of who we are. We are an advocacy group. We have great admiration for all of the support groups. And I can see how meaningful it is when people can tell their stories and other people can say, oh yeah, my ankles hurt also after that fusion. And so everybody has this story that we all nod our heads to and we all understand completely. I told John Nanny a story when I got to meet Yitzhak Perlman, and I said to him, I'm a polio. And he took both my hands in his hands and he looked at me and said, then we know each other very well. And that really is that nodding of the head that we all feel when people are telling a story that resonates with us. So we have to figure out what does it mean to be an advocacy group. Before we know how to go forward, we really need to understand that. And how do we accomplish that? How do we put it out there in the world that we are advocating for post-polio syndrome survivors? We want to set up certain subcommittees ultimately that will work in that area to how do we get the word out. And we have decided on a Facebook page where we can add to it and we can let people into it. And I think it's important that we make sure that the support groups don't think that we are usurping their power or their people. We know there's room for all of us in this, and we want to be sure that we acknowledge the support groups and say, yes, you exist because it's essential, but now we need to add ourselves into the mix so that we can do that. So ultimately, we're going to be talking about marketing. How do we get it out there? We might have a business plan. We don't think we need any money at this moment. That could change down the line. Anybody who does speaking, and I do speaking for district meetings, do you need a PowerPoint? How can we help you be better at what you do when you're asked to speak or to share in a support group setting? And all the speakers, as I said, should support advocacy. I'm hoping to meet with the polio doc here in Chicago next Monday before or after my PT, and I'm going to ask him the simple question. I'm going to ask him the question of, how do you get your information? Where do you get it from? Who are your trusted sources? How do you keep abreast of what's going on in the way of diagnosing, if such a thing is possible? So I'm going to talk to him, and it might be an interview that we have during one of our sessions. He's a remarkable man with a great heart. So I think we have a lot to learn from him. And then how do we train people to be advocates? And what does it mean for someone to be an advocate? I have now added on to the speech that I'm going to give down in Greensboro, North Carolina in November. I've been invited to come down there and speak. I'm certainly going to now add in all of the advocacy and all of the post-polio syndrome. I always spoke about the late effects of polio and how they have affected me, but I have never gone further with that. And now I have reason to go further because of all of you. And then we're going to put together a speakers team, because we get requests all the time. Can you speak at our district meeting? Can you talk to us? And so we would like to put together a team and have volunteers who say, yeah, I can do that one. And then we all basically have a similar script after we tell our stories, so that people understand that we are the go-to. And I think it was Ken who figured out that right now we are the only advocacy group for post-polio syndrome, maybe on the planet. And so we have a responsibility to always give the best information that we can. And so these are going to be our needs as we go forward, and we will ask people to volunteer their time and their expertise to help us get there. So that's my opening today. And anybody has something to say, please, this is a moment. I need all the feedback I can get. I told Ken, if I'm not holding up my end of the deal, that you all have a chance to tell me to do better. Thanks.
I know, like, I'd like to address. Thank you for that introduction. I'd like to address a little bit, because of the fact we are the only advocacy group for post-polio syndrome in the world. Make sure there's a clear understanding of what we are versus a support group. And I can give some examples for that.
Please.
For example, in situations we've already run into, when somebody writes to us and says, I want to get involved, I'm concerned about post-polio syndrome, that I may have it in another country, I don't speak English, what can I do? We're going to find the support group. In this case, the person spoke Spanish. And we found a support group in Mexico that could help that person out. We had a reporter on CBS reporter who wanted to do a story on vaccines in the Boston area. And I saw that she posted on one of the post-polio groups, I need somebody from Boston who has polio, which was great. I'm glad she did that. However, the concern is that that person may not have an expertise in vaccines. So I wrote to her and I said, we're here. And the next time you're looking for an article or something like that on something related to polio, please get in touch with us and we're going to find the person that's best person to speak to you. In another situation, we had somebody write to us about concerns about some legal action that was being taken in a state in the United States, in this case, Montana, I think it was,
Yes.
that some legal action was being considered and taken to speak against vaccines. And she was looking for some talking points on how to deal with that. And so we provided her with some information on how to respond to that situation. You may also have a doctor who says, I know nothing about post-polio syndrome, and we're going to help you to learn how to talk to that doctor in a way to hopefully get that person to start thinking in a different direction on that. In October 13th, we're going to have a physical therapist from Brazil who understands and did the homework and did all the work that doctors should be doing on learning about post-polio syndrome. And she's going to come and talk about that journey and give us some suggestions on how to do that. It may also be the fact that it's not just post-polio syndrome, your rights, but also rights of a person with a disability. I mean, in the United States, we have the American Disability Act law here, and a lot of places do not uphold to it, and we can help you understand where, if you go to a public facility and you have a wheelchair and the bathroom is not accessible, that's a right that you have, that bathroom be accessible. So we need to, if somebody runs into that situation, help them to make sure that wherever it might be a restaurant owner or whatever, or whatever laws we need to help you with, we'll help you on that. If you want to make a presentation to some organization about post-polio syndrome, we're going to develop and help you with the presentation. We'll help you whatever you want, a PowerPoint, anything like that. So that's advocacy, as opposed to a support group which is like the best things in the world, the support groups, because you're talking about your symptoms and try to help, and somebody helps somebody else out. I have this, well, I have the same thing, this is how I dealt with it. And we're actually going to be a support group for the support groups, and directing people to those support groups. So, and I think we were talking also about a possibility of like around January, to have a symposium of all the support groups, so that they all get together and you can get to know which ones are out there. So I just wanted to say that a little bit, Ina, so that people understand what we are as opposed to a support group. Support groups and this group work together. We're a team. We're a team, absolutely. So thank you.
Okay. Kevin, you have something to add?
Yes, I do. I just want to say that I think it's amazing that we got all these groups together to talk about matters and to find ways to do advocacy together. Because I think individually we have a voice, but once we come together, our voice is much more powerful, and we need to give power to stronger voices. And so only by coming together, sharing our experiences and learning, will we be able to have a stronger and more powerful voice to affect change. And when I was at the European Polio Union AGM earlier this year, it struck me in terms of how similar polio organizations' challenges are, and the polio community's challenges are across Europe, and I'm pretty sure that that'll be across the Western world. And as a result, I think we need to find ways where we can work close together to ensure that it makes lives better for the polio community everywhere, not just in our own areas.
I was amazed at how quickly we coalesced and we figured out that we needed to do this, and the commitment from the people you see on the screen and the ones you don't really was the inspiration for me to say, yeah, I need to do something more. So yeah, our voice, our one big voice now, I think will make a huge difference. Anybody else that has a hand up somewhere? John, are you seeing anybody? Oh, David?
Yeah, one of the things that I was just thinking about and really been considering ever since our group started is the number of local advocacy groups where we do distribution in Africa specifically, but there's so many groups that are involved in advocacy that have very minimal voice because of the status, their social status in their own culture. And I'm very much involved and intrigued by how to bring them a greater voice in their own countries. And I'm wondering how we might be able to meld these people in. They can't necessarily be Rotarians because they have absolutely no room for anything. They don't have a budget, for one thing. They may not have a computer. Lots of them have phones. So there would be a connection process there. But there are the groups that are on the ground that are struggling with the access to a public building. As an example, in one of the places in Kenya where we were doing distribution, the disability office was on the 9th floor, and there was no access for disabled people to get to the 9th floor. So they didn't think they had a problem. So it's these kind of things that breaking down and getting the access to these groups, and what we've been channeling through has been their county or state or their region's health workers, and they're the ones who know where those people are. They and a lot of times the pastors know where people are hidden. But again, a lot of these small disability groups, and they meet on a regular basis. A lot of times they live in small communities. And I think a lot of you are aware of and have seen the same situation in your travels as well. But again, their access to things, even like a decent toilet is which is beyond our scope of thinking. But when you have to crawl into a pit latrine and do your business in that manner, and so many of the pit latrines, and I've got videos of this stuff that is just absolutely shocking. So especially for you ladies, if we imagine that you're wearing a skirt and you've got to crawl in, you can let your imagination go on that, on how you deal with a pit latrine. If you don't know what a pit latrine is, it's a hole in the floor. People with 2 good legs can squat over that. That's the intention. So that level of basic needs is one of the things that we in Crutches for Africa have been addressing and are continuing to address, trying to improve those situations. But how do we involve these? How do we reach out and connect the dots? Well, this is part of the process. I'm involved on the ground doing those projects. I'm involved in this group. And so all of you are also involved in your elements. But again, reaching out and being able to pull these other groups that are outside, how do we do that?
Well, it's people like you that we're going to depend on to give us your experiences, so we know where to direct our focus when that is essential to us, because we don't have that life experience that you do. Anybody else you see, John?
We got Gerald. Yeah.
Yes, Ken, you alluded to accessibility, and it's coming evident all the time that our airline industry is way behind. I mean, I was just reading an article yesterday. There's 15,000 damaged wheelchairs all the time, every day. And you talk about accessibility, those bathrooms in airplanes haven't changed in how many years? I mean, a good person that's in good shape's got to back into them, let alone have accessibility. How come they're so far behind? And how come we're letting them be there?
Correct.
I just shake my head.
Correct.
And
I did-
I think that's a big issue. I'm sorry, and I think that's a big issue. I just can't believe a disability group has not been at the airlines at this point. I think some of them are, but not succeeded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. John?
Maureen?
Yes, I'm Joel, Maureen's husband. I'm respectfully submitting a name to you of someone who is absolutely an expert at such socialization that David was referring a need for, and he's correct. It's Ayuba Gafwan in Jos, Nigeria. He is the most prolific type of individual that can deliver to many, many people successfully. And he had a terrible problem between the Muslims and the Christians in delivering his 100 or so wheelchairs to each tribe when he would seek to do so, and he would have them manufactured. He's produced about 18,000 of them in his little lifetime, and very skilled. And he developed a technique of inviting the top Muslim leaders and the top Christian leaders to participate in the distribution of the wheelchairs. And he promised them, if they would keep peace in the country, he would distribute evenly, freely to both of them. And when he did that, it is a huge event for each tribe. No one has to do anything because all the leaders come. And that's such an event that attracts everybody in that village. And it's amazing. It's his, you can see some of his work, if you will, it's wheelchairs for Nigeria. I'm gonna put it in there. My wife will put it on, but I'm respectfully submitting that he is the most talented person we know. We know him well. We had him here. We entertained him for 3 weeks and took him to various churches and rotaries all over the state here as close as we could. And he was very, very communicative and very excellent in his abilities. And that's how he solved his problem.
Joel, we're sending him a container on the 17th of September with crutches, walkers, and standard wheelchairs. And of course, he's involved in making and building the hand crank bicycle wheelchairs. And so, but he is, I think we've shipped to him, I know at least once before. And so, and since he's a Rotarian as well, that really helps the entire process. But thanks for bringing up Ayuba. He's a good man.
Wow.
I know.
feel
Can I cut in?
Please.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave. I've got a family affair I've got to deal with. 2 points quickly for you. We use the same approach in the Middle East, in Saudi, Yemen, and in Iran and Iraq, with bringing together the Shia and the Sunni Muslims and getting wheelchairs out and actually brokering it with the two of them, getting them together. The other one is, just for your information, Airbus Industries, the big competitor to your Boeing, have actually started up a working party. They've got a mock-up in Toulouse at the moment of a proper wheelchair accessible toilet, which you can get a standard, well, I won't say standard, but a narrow wheelchair into, at least a 16-inch. So that's going ahead. There is also a working party on the basis that's going through, which will allow a modified wheelchair, which would be supplied by the airline, which you can actually get into and back into your own space on the aircraft. And that is going ahead with some crash testing, initial crash testing anyway, with dummies in it. They asked me to volunteer, said I was a good one, but there we go. And what's happening with that? They are going to be going ahead at the Paris Air Show next year with some demonstrations. On that note, I'm afraid, Ina and Ken, I'm going to have to say bye, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Well, I can already feel the power here. You know, we all know somebody and something that's going to help us get bigger and better at what we do. But I had just read about the airlines trying to find spaces on their planes to put in a wheelchair, your own wheelchair. And that would be quite wonderful, wouldn't it? Quite wonderful. Anybody else?
We have 3 people with hands up, I think. Yes.
Oh,
Marie?
Marie?
Constant.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to address this group. One of the things that I would like to make as a recommendation, I know we're in the early stages, but I've attended every one of the meetings, and I'll tell you, I'm highly impressed with the resources and the expertise that's available at each one of the sessions. I would absolutely, without equivocation, recommend with all my heart, if this group does not set up some sort of a strategic plan complete with a SWOT analysis to determine all of the recommendations, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats, as well as identifying strategic goals in each of the major targeted areas we want to address. This will be nothing other than just a big kvetch session every 2 weeks, and that's useless for us or for anyone else that we can impact. And as a 60+ year advocate, I'm sorry, I don't have the time left in my life to be able to sit around and kvetch. I want to get stuff done. So
All right.
count on me. I will help you in any way I can. I've chaired and facilitated a strategic plan for a special ed school here in Las Vegas, and we are in year 2 of implementing a program that this school has never seen before, and ultimately has made incredible inroads in terms of not just providing proper education for special needs students, but staffing the school properly, facilitating the school properly, and getting funding for the school. And it would never have happened had I not been able to pull the board, as I'm a member of their board, through the process of analyzing through the SWOT analysis what's going on and what we need in order to thrive, not survive. And that's our motto. So count on me. I will be there to help you if you choose to continue in that direction. Thank you.
That was a promise we all made to ourselves individually and now collectively. And with your little poke, we are definitely going in that right direction. Thank you, Marie. Thank you.
George Allen. Unmute yourself.
Hi, just a couple of things. Earlier on, Ken, you talked about the difference between an advocacy group and a support group. It strikes me that to talk about these in a black and white terms is not helpful, because I would suggest that some groups are more advocates and spend their time trying to raise awareness, trying to get the message through, and just a shorter time supporting the members, whereas there are member groups that's all about sharing, just what's happening to each other and how they're getting on and all that sort of stuff, but not doing as much in terms of the hitting the politicians, hitting the health services and the social care services, which is what really the advocacy end of things is. One of the other things that I'm thinking is that we're a very disparate group. We might sometimes become a desperate group, but at the moment we're quite disparate, and the political framework, the health framework, and the social care frameworks vary right across this group. So one of the things we might want to be looking at is how you can help people tweak what works in one country into how it might work in another. So it's a big job, and I certainly agree with Marie that it would be useful to get forward with the plan, and to quote Macbeth, if 'twere done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I hear you. I'm certain that some of the support groups delve into a little bit of advocacy, but we're going to keep our focus on the advocacy and leave the support to the people who really do that well and have the following for that. So I hear you. Thank you.
Dick is next.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. We are a universal group across the board, not just Rotarians, but everyone is welcome. Period.
Right. Period. End of stop. Just because we come under the disabilities group at Rotary doesn't mean that we will not accept everybody who needs our help right now and wants to be part of the change.
I don't see anyone else with hands up. I do want to make a comment in the aspect that it is a fine line between an advocacy group and a support group, because, for instance, we had a steering committee meeting yesterday, and it was very productive, but it actually did morph into sort of a support group meeting to some degree. So it is a fine line, but I think what Marie Kratzky, is it? Okay, said that, we do need to, have a strategic plan, and, it's so important to make sure we stay focused on the advocacy aspect of it. And I see Jim Arnett has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just wanted to comment that I think one of the areas we should also keep aware of, there are a lot of folks out there that are caregivers who have kind of an objective view of what's going on in the lives of those people we care for. And as an addict, in terms of advocating, I think we can do a lot to help caregivers understand how they can help advocate for support, not just having a person speak who happens to be a post-polio syndrome survivor or is experiencing that right now. So as part of what this group does, as part of our strategic plan, I'd like to see at least a small element talk about how do we educate the caregivers.
It's definitely on our agenda. Anybody else?
Yes, Div, if we can, there you go.
Thank you very much. My very first official Rotary meeting was with this group, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the very first meeting of the group as well. I'm a para-athlete, and I was introduced to the group as a polio survivor. Since then, we've put together a program to venture into Africa and do fundraising for Polio Plus. What amazes me is that in every meeting I talk, in all the preparations we do, without any exception, somebody pops up and say, oh, you know what? I'm actually a polio survivor too. So us older folks have learned to just kind of get it behind us and to sit on it, not say too much. I grew up having to avoid my polio disposition. And it was only in later years that I became perhaps educated enough to be able to not only advocate for it, but share what we as polio survivors went through. So I had polio when I was 4. I had polio a second time, maybe not a viral one when I was 30. I had it when I was 50, and recently, at 60 years old, I dealt with some of the ravages of polio. So what I'm saying is, if we advocate and anything related to polio, I think my message at the moment is, please, please do what you can. Don't let people get exposed to it. Avoid it from happening. If it gets hold of you, it's forever. It doesn't stop. Polio is the one, as far as I'm concerned, the one disease that never stops coming. I think it'll be, in my case at least, until death us do part. So we are now going with passion into Africa as we speak, and as we promote and as we tell about polio and vaccinations and the reason to avoid it. There's no way we can do that without, at the same time, mentioning the fact that you will have polio for the rest of your life. And for the older folk and those that have had it for a while, be careful. It's as sneaky as the virus itself is. You know, when a virus infects a cell, it gets injected into it, and it camouflages itself as part of the genetic material of the cell itself, so that the rest of the body cannot recognize it. I think the progression of polio is very similar to what the virus is. It comes in all kinds of guises, and not many people realize you need to the very first thing you need to do is to try and eliminate the effects of the virus itself. So what I'm saying is, I'm going with passion into Africa. We'll be participating in a competition in Morocco in the second half of September. We'll be sharing it on our Facebook, and I hope I'll take all of you on a journey there, and to get your support as we go along. Thank you very much. And it's an amazing group. It was because of this meeting that soon you will read about it in some Rotary blog. It was a meeting that made my mind.
You're breaking up, Dev. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dev.
So, Ina, if I can speak, I don't know.
Please.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up. I need to learn how to do that. So, to go back to your opening comments, as to where we're now at the point of moving forward. You had mentioned a number of committees that we want to set up, and I think we're inviting people to let us know if they want to be on those committees. Can you kind of go through them again? Because what we'd like to do, and for those who are not on our mailing list yet, I urge you to once again leave us your email, because what we'll do after this meeting is we'll send out a place where you can sign up for one of those committees and say, I want to be a part of this. So, and we'll do that through our mailing list. We may also do for social media, but I'm going to turn it back to you. Just what are those committees again?
We talked about marketing. How do we get the word out there that we exist? Business planning, that can also come under a little bit of marketing. How are we going to go forward, and what is that going to look like? Putting together presentations for PowerPoints or for handouts. Then we need speakers, and all future speakers should support advocacy. If you have recommendations of anybody that you think would be interesting to our group in advocacy, then please pass along the names to us, and we'll contact them and with your guidance, and make sure that we get good speakers who understand our topic. And then training. We need to train people how to be advocates. Then we need a speakers team of advocates. Every time you're asked to speak, you know, what can we do to support you in that speech that you're about to give? And then anybody else has another idea for any other committee that we need to put together, we want to hear that as well. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about SWOT analysis, right? And strategic goals. And that's going to be a really big part of the underlying structure of how we go forward in all of this. And Marie, I'm going to need you to sit down with me one day and tell me about SWOT, okay? I will. Okay.
So it's actually that business planning group that's going to kind of probably work on that SWOT analysis, and then also to start establishing what the goals would be for this group over the next year. I think I'm just kind of brainstorming on this. And then to also not, I think we need to set up plan goals not only for 1 year, but maybe for 5 years. Probably that business planning group will do that. The marketing group is going to work on things like the social media part of it, the newsletter. Eventually, we want to get a web page up and running. And so if anybody has skills or interests in that area, that's something that you probably want to sign up for the marketing committee. Putting together presentations. I don't think you need to have a knowledge of how to do a PowerPoint or to create a pamphlet, but if you have the knowledge of what should be in that pamphlet and on that PowerPoint, that we could certainly use your expertise on that. Because I think what we want to try to do too is come up with one message, all kind of giving out the same message, I think. So that's, once again, as you had mentioned, the speakers, we need speakers who are going to support the advocacy part of it. And I think we will at some point. We've talked a little bit about it and still brainstorming on it, come up with some sort of training session on, because being an advocate comes natural to many people, but to other people, it may be a little training need to be there, because it does take courage and it does take tenacity to be an advocate. And I think we want to support people on that. And then obviously people too who want to be advocates. I've had a number of people write to us and say, I want to do something. What can I do? And we can work with people that say, I want to be an advocate. Well, we're an army. We're an army of people that go out there and advocate for this thing. And once again, people who are good at speaking and feel comfortable speaking, if they can let us know that, like Wes down there, I know he's really good at that. So that we can have them available when somebody writes to us and says we need a speaker, we can tap into those speakers. So just kind of summarizing a little bit on what we have talked about as far as those different committees. So
I'm good with all that. Anybody else? Thank you, Mona.
I would just suggest, if you want to be on one of these subcommittees, please put that interest in the chat directed to Ina.
Or John. That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
And the other thing is, I'm sorry, my delay makes a problem, but the other thing is that we're a global group. So we're going to focus on every country in the world, because it's a global problem. So
yeah, it's interesting when I zoom in to some of the meetings here, you know, we are an older population, and I have to keep reminding myself that around the world, it's a much younger population that will be struggling very soon, if they're not struggling now with post-polio in their 30s and 40s, where a lot of us are in our 70s or 80s.
yeah, and one example is, and then we don't know the answer yet because we're very different messages, but we've heard from a number of countries in Africa who even getting people to take the vaccine has been a challenge for them. And I think we need to look more into that. Maybe David has more information on that. And certainly I know the RAG certainly does. But we need to find out what's going on there and why people are not taking the vaccine. And is there a room for advocacy in that area to try to encourage that? I know Rotary has already taken a major role on that. So is there something we can do there? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It's still something we're looking into.
Yeah. I mean, I always come back to that when we talk of advocacy, is that we have to somehow keep remembering that vaccines are maybe the first place for advocacy. It's shocking to me that we have to even think about that, but I think it was Professor Mike Kossoff the other day. He said he'd lived through three pandemics: polio, COVID, and stupidity. He said, unfortunately, there's no vaccine for class.
Put it yes.
Oh yeah, the one thing that I run another group, the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. I'm the president of that, and the one thing and we've been only around for a year, but one thing we've learned, and I think as a group here we need to learn too, is we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
No,
so when we do advocacy is important for us to understand if there are other groups already doing the work.
I know. Well, I'm good for today. Anybody else?
We have Dave that has his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the things I was thinking about with the issues with increasing and keeping up with the polio vaccines in developing countries is to, again, access the local community health officers and to utilize the disabled network that already exists there. And I think that's one of the simplest way, but we are also discussing the age of polio survivors in other parts of the world. And it probably, well, in Pakistan, it goes down to the youngest, but across Africa, I'm seeing 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds that had polio. So talking about us being I refer to myself as a dinosaur, when I talk about polio, but it's interesting now too, that since there's been a case and the issues in New York, people are becoming aware of polio again. So this can work to our advantage here in the United States to increase that awareness, but to advocate for change on the ground, I believe we need to reach into that lower, as I mentioned before. So, I think for me, that's our primary goal, and something that we've been already working towards with developing a network across Africa where those groups can talk to each other. And I think that's what we're developing here, is a network of groups that can talk to each other. First, we have to know each other exists. We have to understand that there needs to be a channel of communication. So it's called Disability Network Africa, DNA, the Strands of Life. So within that network and building that network, groups will be able to communicate with their local health providers and then be able to communicate between other countries with what's going on there, how they're being able to come up with income and those things. The biggest problem I have in really building this network is that people get really excited about it at the start, but when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of putting together the data and the details, then they get bogged down. And overcoming that seems to be one of the issues that we face in getting the information out. Things get bogged down. And I think that's just something that we see naturally in just about any group. So just another thought from Dave.
Okay, Div is next.
Thank you. Since when you talked about vaccines, since the very first meeting and since we started with this campaign of advocating polio and fundraising for Polio Plus, it came to our attention that Eswatini, the country right on our doorstep in Southern Africa, have run out of vaccines. They simply don't have the funds to acquire it. So it's a real world with real difficulties. And polio, when we first started speaking, everybody said, you know, polio, it's one of those forever subjects, but it's ever young as far as I'm concerned, because we are battling to get vaccines into a neighboring country. As we speak and as we go along on this journey of ours, we find out that there are many people that don't believe that it really exists. Others that have had it that don't take notice of. And what and I'm really passionate about is to shake people up and tell them, don't get it. It's too late once you've had it. I've lived through the impossibility of taking vaccines, and I've had to pay the price for it. So I'm doing as much as I can, shouting as loud as I can to avoid people from getting polio. And once those that have had it, to ignore it. It's not possible. You cannot do that. Chair, Aina, if I may, can I post in the chat a Facebook link that we'll be updating as we take the journey towards Morocco?
You bet. We'd love to follow that.
It's perhaps also sharing in lessons we take in marketing. It's not perfect, but as we progress, we pick up all kinds of interesting tips and hints, and we'd love to share that with you too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Elsane? Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I appreciate the comments that have been made. And one of the challenges that I have seen just as of yesterday in speaking with a physical therapist from the University of Utah College of Health, she informed me that the University of Utah, who, you know, is where the Huntsman Cancer Center is and other medical professionals are there, that she has discovered that the University of Utah, she has hit a brick wall, that they really have no interest in this topic of polio and post-polio, which was a real slam. That really was a shock to me. And it really put out there what we are up against and how do we advocate for when we have universities that have no interest. Thank you for letting me voice that.
It's good for us to know where the roadblocks are. I've never heard that before spoken, you know, so directly, that they're just not interested. Anybody have any take on that?
No, I think Diane Wall is having trouble raising her hand, but I think she does want to either make a comment or ask a question. Diane, unmute yourself.
Do you hear me now? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Very interesting about the University of Utah. I have had a 25-year or plus relationship with my physiatrist, and he's followed me ever since I went through the post-polio clinic back in 1996. And we talked about the advocacy that we need to do. And he said, you know, when you went through the clinic in 1996, I was a young physiatrist, and that was an exciting time for us to study post-polio. So I really wanted to get in on it. And he said, I cannot believe how much it has changed throughout the United States and through his own experience. So he said, it's crucial that all of you that are survivors start to speak out about the need that we, have, our physical needs and our medical needs. And interestingly too, I had a fall a few months ago, and I couldn't get myself up, so I called 911. And unfortunately, I think we're on first name basis now, but the man that was in charge, the lieutenant of the EMT, said he needed my history of why I fell. I explained I was born with polio and have had it all my life. And so he said, wow, I've never had a polio patient yet. And I've been in this business for 15 years as an EMT. Now think about that kind of coverage that we have to recognize is lacking. So, thank you.
Okay, Francis?
Hi, it's in response to the information about the University of Utah. I don't know Utah particularly, but I am very surprised that you haven't heard much about this particular thing, because it's one of the biggest things that our members talk about, and that's being in front of GPs, clinicians, consultants who basically say, first of all, you can't have had polio because polio is eradicated. And secondly, that PPS doesn't exist, it's just made up. And I'm interested in knowing who you think your audience is, who you advocating to as a group.
I have heard that there are doctors who do not believe that PPS exists. I don't even know where to begin with that. It's almost like we all have the same kinds of symptoms, and you're telling me that doesn't mean anything. I don't know how to answer your question directly. Ken, do you have an idea? Who are we advocating to? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's every person who is a survivor and every medical person who treats a survivor.
I think you're correct on that. I think there are a lot of people who, even people who have polio or who have been misdiagnosed with polio, we need to advocate to get them more aware of the fact that post-polio syndrome exists and is for real. If it's not in your life at this point, it could be coming to it. Certainly, obviously, as you said, the medical profession is very important on that. We actually have targeted or want to be a part of the process with Rotary too, because Rotary has been so good in advocating or eradicating, the post-polio around the world, and God bless them for that, because there's a lot of people that have that are alive today because of that effort. But we want to also to turn their attention to post-polio and people who have polio, so we're going to target them. Rotary is a huge network of 1.4 million people around the world. It's a network we can use to get the word out. They include doctors and all sorts of professions in that. So if we can target Rotary as one of our groups, we can do that. The idea with advocacy is that the more we can get people aware of the reality of all the situation, that itself is going to lead to better care for people with post-polio syndrome. It's going to lead to better support for people with post-polio syndrome. It's going to lead to the better human rights for people with post-polio syndrome. So yes, it's a huge audience, but we're going to do it as anywhere possible. We're going to get the word out, because I think it's critical, because as some of you already know, you'll talk to somebody about polio and they said, oh, I didn't know polio was still around. So that in itself is an awareness thing. So hopefully that answers the question. It's a broad subject, but I think wherever we can advocate, the better.
Right. we also want to be a support group for support groups, a clearinghouse for making sure that people around the world know where these support groups are. And also another target is family members. When I was first diagnosed with post-polio syndrome, I had difficulty convincing family members of post-polio and what needs to be done, and also caregivers. So there's a wide range of people and organizations and areas that we need to advocate what post-polio syndrome is and why we're trying to why we're trying to eradicate polio and the lifelong aspects of it. I believe Mickey is next. Unmute yourself, Mickey.
Thank you. Regarding the question of where do we start? And my doctor's in full agreement with what I do. I'm quite forward in walking up. Somebody's got a new baby, and you say, "Oh, how cute! How old is he?" etc. And then you say, "I hope you're having him immunized." If they say, "Definitely not," I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want them to end up like me. I'm on crutches." And if they are, I said, "Please tell all your friends to make sure your children are immunized." I think that's a good way to start. Another thing I do is I know people from different countries, not necessarily with polio, but I asked them if they will translate information. We had a group in British Columbia before we joined up with March of Dimes that for quite a while I'd had an interesting pamphlet like, "Do you have these symptoms?" and that. And I had it transcribed into Punjabi and Chinese, and some of the doctor's offices would carry the pamphlets. So just a couple of suggestions, that's all.
Thank you. And George Allen, I think, go ahead. Unmute yourself, George.
Yeah. I noticed somebody mentioning on the chat about times to be able to include Australia and New Zealand. There's maybe that would be difficult, but certainly being in contact with people like Polio Australia and New Zealand who have loads of material that somebody said we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If it's about gathering what folk have already put together that works, and maybe Ken, that might be something you want to follow up with those two organizations.
Yeah, if I could just say something on that. We actually have a very close contact now with Australia, and I think we'll at some point do a joint meeting with them. Obviously, we're going to have to change the time for that. The group in New Zealand has reached out to us, and I don't know if there's anybody here from that group here today, but they have reached out to us and they want to make sure that we keep them informed on what we're doing because they want to keep it in their newsletter. We've heard also that they're struggling a little bit in New Zealand. So yes, we are very much aware, and we want to work in collaboration with those groups. Yes.
Okay, Carl has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just went to the NIH website and put in polio, and what you get is the Rare Diseases Institute. So I think that's part of the concept problem. And that if we want to advocate, I think that, and I might volunteer for this, is that we should talk to some of the people at this institute, and they could are the ones who are setting the research fund profile for these different diseases. So it's interesting. Polio is now a rare disease at NIH, and that may be why it's not getting much attention.
Thank you. And Michael Aguilera, unmute yourself, Michael.
Hello. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good evening from my colleagues in East Africa here. It is, I'm excited. What am I on? Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm Michael Rotarian from Soroti, Eastern Uganda. I have been following and I'm excited about the discussions we have had, but I just wanted to bring into the group to know that the sub-region, Karamoja sub-region, those people who are from Uganda, and I know you've heard about it, the whole region is facing hunger because of climate change. And therefore, there is a complete breakdown of the health system. People are dying, especially children, because of hunger. Very many die in a day, over 200 people die because of food shortages. And therefore, I wanted to bring to this platform that as we speak about polio, there are some geographical locations that are disadvantaged because of the climate change, which severely impacts on the health systems. And totally, Karamoja is not having anyone going into the facilities. The women are dying, children are dying, and therefore they cannot access the mandatory vaccines that we're talking about here. So I wanted to bring that, and my colleagues in Uganda know very well how the sub-region is affected with hunger. And therefore, people who are having no food cannot be thinking of taking someone in the hospital. So that is what I wanted to put. So therefore, I'm requesting, how do we move forward to secure resources so that we begin implementing in our countries on polio eradication? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay. Well, our next meeting will be on September the 8th, the second and fourth Thursday of each month. And you'll be getting a newsletter with an update on that and the link. And if anybody has any ideas for speakers, if you would put that in the chat room as well. I'm starting a list right now. And Diane, I wanted to say one thing. I bet the EMTs have had polios before, but they just didn't know it. Right. Even Dr. Mike Kossoff, who I spoke to the other day, he's 84 years old, and he didn't find out until 20 years ago that he had polio as a child because the family kept it a secret. And on his aunt's deathbed, she finally admitted to him that he had polio. So
my mother got the polio when she was in her 9th month. So I was actually born with it. And what's very interesting, she told me on her deathbed that my older brother also had it, but they never told him because he didn't have the
I heard the stories all over the country when I was traveling. Yeah,
I was in shock. I thought, how could that be that, you know?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mike is in the house, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's Mike.
Good. Ken, anything else before we wrap up today? We've kept these people a little extra time.
Yeah, no, at this point, I think we've covered everything. Just a reminder that you'll be getting a newsletter where you can sign up for the different committees. Please do so if you're interested. We're the only way we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish is by having many people involved. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you all for this day. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everybody.